The FDP is calling for a strategic Bitcoin reserve. No joke, this is serious. Frank Schäffler writes that the Bundesbank and ECB should include Bitcoin in their strategic currency reserves. That's super bullish. Let's take a look at what's behind it. Additionally, the current Treasury Secretary in the US also confirms that he supports a strategic Bitcoin reserve and the Cynthia Loomis plan. Even Satoshi is now calling for a Bitcoin reserve. We'll get to why Satoshi is talking about a Bitcoin reserve later. Everyone is somehow talking about a Bitcoin reserve now. It's really unbelievable. It looks like Bitcoin reserves are the #1 topic in the Bitcoin community right now. Everyone is talking about a Bitcoin reserve now. It's really unbelievable. It looks like Bitcoin reserves are now the #1 topic in the Bitcoin community. Donald Trump seems to have really kickstarted something here that can't be turned back. VanEck has now released their 2025 Bitcoin predictions, where they also say that the US will introduce a Bitcoin reserve in 2025. They also expect a Bitcoin price in US dollars. Before we get to the FDP, let's talk about Satoshi and why he's now calling for a Bitcoin reserve strategy. This is of course not Satoshi Nakamoto, but Breaking Japan is considering the creation of a strategic Bitcoin reserve. A parliament member, Satoshi Hamada, so not Satoshi Nakamoto, but Satoshi Hamada, has just proposed the concept and referred to Bitcoin as a potential national asset. So things are really happening fast in all these countries. We've seen it in Russia, now here in Japan, and then we have the individual states in the U.S. Now we even have a strategic Bitcoin reserve being called for by the FDP here in Germany. Joe Nakoda has been calling for Germany to build a strategic Bitcoin reserve for a long time. Joe Nakoda also predicted that the former AfD politician who pushed Bitcoin in the Bundestag said that if the US establishes a strategic Bitcoin reserve, there will be a FOMO effect, and then a whole bunch of other countries will jump on board. And that's also my prediction. As soon as the US gets started, a ton of countries will follow. It's still a bit of a bold topic right now, but we can actually see that the FDP is starting to embrace Bitcoin. And that is also my prediction. As soon as the USA gets started, many countries will follow. Now, this is still a bit of a bold topic, but we can actually see that the FDP is starting to take a step toward Bitcoin. I also had a conversation with Mr. Böhringer from the AfD, who has also positioned themselves in favor of Bitcoin and even included Bitcoin in their election platform. But the AfD has been a bit hesitant when it comes to a Bitcoin reserve strategy. Mr. Böhringer even said that he probably doesn't think it's realistic for the US to actually do it, but of course, he's open to it if they do. The FDP is really stepping it up now. They're not just saying, hey, we're open to Bitcoin, but they're clearly stating that the ECB and the Bundesbank need to buy Bitcoin. Or rather, that has to be a bit of an exaggeration. They should buy Bitcoin. Here, Frank Schäffler says that the Bundesbank and the ECB should include Bitcoin in their currency reserves. I don't know if this is just a joke or if it's really meant seriously. This isn't an official statement from the FDP. It's just a post by Frank Schäffler. Frank Schäffler is also the one who's most likely to advocate for free currency competition within the FDP. He's the first one, I'd say, to stand up for free markets or something like that. The FDP has lost credibility. The libertarian and liberal spectrum isn't taken seriously. They claim to support freedom but have statist ideas and demand market interventions. It could be that this is an attempt to bring the liberal and libertarian wing back behind the FDP, although I am very critical of what is currently happening with the FDP. On one hand, they talk about freedom, but on the other hand, they have some very statist ideas and are making some pretty statist demands. They claim to be about freedom, but at the same time, they're calling for massive market interventions. I mean, I don't want to jump the gun too much, but it could be that the real intention here is to actually push Bitcoin forward. I mean, that would actually be politically smart. Then the FDP could distinguish itself from other parties and reconnect with its libertarian course, so to speak. But the question is whether this is really credible. So I can't really believe this yet. To me, it sounds more like they're just throwing out some random message here. We've set up a Bitcoin reserve strategy. This hints at the growing interest in Bitcoin reserve strategies amid the hype. And then, well, this is ultimately an allusion to the idea of introducing the Bitcoin reserve strategy now that everyone is hyping Bitcoin when it is over. He's just joking here, saying, you guys have 1 million at the AfD, and many have accused them of jumping on the Bitcoin bandwagon and including it in their election platform when the Bitcoin price is high. And here, Frank Schäffler says, I've already called for this. Back then, they were still called Hans Meyer, so I had been pushing for this pretty early on. And the same thing Mr. Böhringer said too. And here, Frank Schäffler says, I already called for this back when they were still called Hans Meyer, so he had been pushing for it pretty early on. And Mr. Böhringer said the same thing. He also said he got into Bitcoin back in 2011 or something like that. I mean, you can always say that in hindsight. With Frank Schäffler, that's actually true because he was indeed in a conversation with Blocktrainer, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, where they talked about Bitcoin and stuff like that. He's pretty open about it, but the question is whether everyone in the FDP is that open. I mean, I'm open to being surprised here. We could also have a chat with Frank Schäffler. Feel free to write in the comments below if you think we should have a conversation about this. If that would interest you, or if you'd rather say, nah, not really into it, we'd rather do our own thing. I think you should always be pretty open about it, even when politicians open up and stuff. They're just people too. So you guys don't really have that big of a problem or hesitation like some people who say, nah, you just don't talk to politicians in general. I even jokingly commented under Frank Schäffler's tweet, hey guys, not just implement a Bitcoin reserve strategy, but sell off all the German gold reserves and buy Bitcoin with that. That's what's currently being called for in the US by Senator Loomis, but also by Michael Saylor, who says we should sell off all the gold reserves. Germany still has quite a bit of gold reserves. I mean, that would be crazy if it went that far, but it's definitely a stretch. It was obviously just a joke, but there's actually a lot happening in the US right now. According to Senator Loomis, who introduced the US Bitcoin Reserve Bill, the next Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, will be a key ally in getting my strategic Bitcoin reserve passed. More people now advocate for a Bitcoin reserve than oppose it. In the US, many politicians, representatives, including Trump crew, are connected to Elon Musk, Howard Lutnick, Vivek Ramaswamy, RFK, and others like Scott Bessent, new SEC chief. These Bitcoin bulls, like the Treasury Secretary, support Bitcoin as a reserve strategy. Of course, in Europe and in Germany, it's not quite the same, but in the US, there are so many politicians, so many representatives, the whole Trump crew, and they're all connected to people like Elon Musk, Howard Lutnick, Vivek Ramaswamy, RFK. And I'm sure I've forgotten a couple more, like Scott Bessent, and of course the new SEC chief, and so on. So, these are all massive Bitcoin bulls, and now they're stepping up like the Treasury Secretary, saying, hey, I support this. This is awesome. We need Bitcoin as a reserve strategy. Donald Trump confirmed it yesterday when asked about a Bitcoin reserve. He didn't say yes to a Bitcoin reserve, but mentioned making crypto significant. Eric Trump also said, in 2021, we need to be a Bitcoin nation. And he didn't exactly say, yes, we're going to do a Bitcoin reserve, but he did mention that they want to make crypto a big deal, something along those lines. Eric Trump was on stage and also said, hey, 2001, we really need to become the Bitcoin nation here. What his father is doing here, that he wants to make the USA a crypto stronghold, that must clearly be supported. And it's so fascinating how everyone is really rallying around the Bitcoin reserve now. And the FOMO is definitely real. You can't deny it anymore. The FOMO is here. And now, check out what Goldman Sachs, one of the most relevant international investment banks, has to say about this in 2021. Could we truly see a lot of major multinationals putting Bitcoin on their balance sheet and that kind of thing?
I think it's definitely possible, and as we've started to see, over the last year or so, there's been a lot more clarity, probably outside the U.S. There's clearly been a big spike in valuations across the entire crypto space since the U.S. presidential elections, which is likely driven by what we expect will be a more favorable regulatory environment, and that gives institutions more confidence overall.
He says that multinational corporations will start adding Bitcoin to their balance sheets like Apple, Meta, Google, Microsoft, and so on. Microsoft has turned it down for now, but definitely multinationals will follow suit. So we have the big companies, we have the US, potentially Germany. I still can't believe it because Germany sold off their Bitcoin. I just can't wrap my head around it. Germany, which is on such a downward spiral, is now betting on Bitcoin. From the bottom of my heart, I would really love for Germany to do that. I still can't quite believe it, but I definitely trust countries like China, Russia, and the US to pull it off. And then we actually have the 2025 VanEck predictions. So VanEck is also a big asset manager that has a Bitcoin ETF. They're making their Bitcoin bull predictions here, saying that Bitcoin will reach $180,000 in Q1 2025. 1,025, 180,000. It will reach. That's already super bullish. But what's even crazier is the prediction number. So the US is really going to embrace Bitcoin with a strategic reserve and ramp up crypto adoption. So the US is really going all in on Bitcoin, or rather. So they're definitely going to bet on crypto here and implement a Bitcoin reserve strategy. So we also have major asset managers confirming all of this. 2 days ago, I reported on Bitwise, which also predicted that by 2025, there will be twice as many countries publicly holding Bitcoin on their balance sheets as there are right now. So we're seeing the ultimate bull case rolling in. And if you want to get in on this and buy Bitcoin right now, I definitely recommend checking it out. I'll drop a link below for Bitcoin. It's the easiest way to buy Bitcoin in Europe. You can still get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin with the code BitcoinHotel. I absolutely recommend checking out CoinTracking. In my opinion, it's the best and easiest tax tool to track your taxes and generate tax reports effortlessly. It's actually free. The first trades are all free. Only when you exceed a certain limit does it start costing money. But with the code BitcoinHotel, you can get a lifetime subscription with up to 10% off. Sorry, the right code is BTC Hotel 1000. And the best part is you can also use it as a portfolio tracker. Here you can E.G. You can also see when Bitcoins are tax-free and when they're not. You can see all your balances, like how much value you currently have in your portfolio and so on. You can always see the movements, like how my portfolio has developed. So I absolutely recommend it. I'll also drop a link to coin tracking below. Let me know if the FDP in Germany will start buying Bitcoin again soon. See you later. Peace out.